Welcome back to Small College Conversations. I'm Jim Abbott. I'm the founder of the business of Small College Athletics. Today, I am joined by Gary Pine, the athletic director at Azusa Pacific University. Gary, thanks so much for your time.
Jim, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our time together.
Well, I am looking forward to it as well. You and I have had a few calls like this over the past few months, and I'm grateful that you have the time today to kind of share a little bit about your experience and in particular some of the things that you have going on at Azusa Pacific right now. To start with, would you just kind of share with the audience a little bit about your background and how you got started and ended up in your position as athletic director?
Yeah, I'm glad to, and I'm very blessed in my history and the people who've been a part of my life. But I came to Azusa Pacific 45 years ago as an 18-year-old out of the Midwest. I wanted to work in professional baseball. I wanted to be in the front office of professional baseball. Our athletic director at that time, a gentleman by the name of Cliff Hamlow, was a friend of the family, and he told my dad, he said, "Hey, get Gary out here and we'll work him in athletics, and we'll see what we can do to get him connected with either the Dodgers or the Angels." And I was fortunate enough my junior year in college to get an internship that actually turned into a 2-year internship with the Angels and working in their media relations office. And a wonderful experience, really enjoyed it. But I had also learned in the course of time how much I enjoyed college athletics. Cliff put me to work right away. Even for the first day of classes at APU, I was working in the athletic office doing the lowest of jobs that could be done. And so I like to tell people I've been involved in college athletics for 45 years, starting when I was 18. And when I kind of hit the fork in the road about would I stay with working in Major League Baseball and take those opportunities that might be presented to an intern or stay in college athletics, I decided to go with college athletics. I just liked the youthful enthusiasm that was around college athletics. I liked the change of seasons and the different sports and the different coaches you got to work with. And so that opportunity presented itself. I'm going into my senior year of college. Cliff said when I graduated, I could become the first ever full-time sports information director at Azusa Pacific in 1984 for the grand salary of $11,000 a year. And I went fist pumped and said, "Yeah, let's do this. Let's go." And with great enthusiasm, entered into the professional side of it as a full-time paid employee. I will say that I guess I did well enough my first year that Cliff gave me a significant pay raise the following year that made the work a little bit more rewarding financially. But came up through the sports information ranks. We were very fortunate to have an unbelievably unique story around Christian Okoye. Went on to become a Pro Bowl football running back with the Kansas City Chiefs, but he started his football playing career here at Azusa Pacific, and it was just a unique story that I won't get into very deeply here. But the story was so unique, it opened up to Sports Illustrated and CNN and ESPN and all these national outlets that caught the attention of a lot of the local schools. And fortunately, one day, USC called me and said, "Gary, we have an opening in our sports information office. We've heard your work. We'd like for you to consider." And so I did. I worked at USC for 3 years under one of the finest SIDs, I think, in the history of college sports, a gentleman by the name of Tim Tessalone. Just did a fabulous job of mentoring me and training me. And I got to work with some great coaches and obviously some wonderful sports there at USC. From there, I went to the Big West office as their director of communications for that conference for a year. When Azusa Pacific called me and said, "Gary, you want to come back?" I said, "No, not really. I'm kind of, my trajectory is that direction, and nothing against my alma mater, but it's kind of in my rearview mirror." But as we talked and looked into it more, I felt like this was right. I should come back to Azusa Pacific as an assistant athletic director, still working in sports information. I did that in 1993. And the first 6 weeks, I said, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? This is the worst decision I've ever made." I'd gotten used to the bells and whistles of Division I, but that was 32 years ago now, and I'm still here at Azusa Pacific. It really turned out to be one of the best decisions in terms of raising our family in this kind of small college athletic environment. It was just wonderful for our family, and just progressed through there to the point where I was named the athletic director in the summer of 2011. And in that course of time, I got to work I'm the fourth athletic director in Azusa Pacific's 75-year history of athletics. And I got to work side by side as a right-hand guy to all three of my predecessors, Dr. Cliff Hamlow, Dr. Terry Franson, and Bill O'Dell. And all three of them are members of the NAIA Hall of Fame. I mean, I stand on some shoulders of some huge men, and I'll never be a member of the NAIA Hall of Fame. I'm not that good, but I was well trained, and I learned from like someone like Cliff Hamlow how to be a great administrator, from Terry Franson how to motivate and encourage and inspire people to do things that they're not even sure they knew they could do, and from Bill O'Dell how to solve deep problems. I think all three of those guys brought something unique to the table that I was able to watch and to learn from. And I don't think I've mastered any of those skills as well as they have, but I was well mentored along the way for this. And it's been a wonderful ride and a wonderful journey. Grateful for my time in Division One, but I think I'm wired more to serve the small college level and to have the more personal interaction with the student athletes and the coaches that I think we're allowed to have here.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning Cliff, and obviously I knew Bill. We were, sort of peer ADs at the time, and obviously Azusa was the premier program in the NAIA at that time.
I don't know. Oklahoma City was always right there nipping at us. I'm not sure if it was us or you, but you're right. We had some great national competition for each other in terms of being the best in the NAIA.
Yeah, so you come back from the bright lights and the gizmos and the gadgets to Azusa. And how long were you on campus before you became athletic director?
I had to think about it. That's a good question. From 93 to 2011. Help me with my math. Is that 18 years?
18 or 19.
Yeah.
But somewhere during that time, you were gone to USC in the Big West Conference, right?
Well, yeah, in between. So I started here in 1980 as a student in athletics. In 1989, I left for USC in the Big West. I came back in 1993. And then that 93, I began that climb administratively. We had a president here who saw something in me, and he came to me and said, Gary, I think someday when Bill O'Dell retires, we'd like for you to be the next athletic director. And so I bid my time, and Bill did a great job mentoring me and preparing me for this. I was 48 when I became an athletic director. I know a lot of, particularly in NAIA, ADs are much younger when they start. But I love this place, and I felt it was the calling on my life to work here at Azusa Pacific and perhaps be the AD. And so I bid my time until Bill said, okay, I'm ready to hand it to you. And I think I was ready.
Well, so really early in your tenure, maybe at the start of your tenure, you helped lead Azusa Pacific in a transition from the NAIA to Division II. Now, was that, I'm certain you were involved in the decision. Were you the AD when that process started, or was Bill still the AD?
Bill was the AD. It's a fascinating story, Jim. We had, in 2007, we won the NAIA Men's Soccer National Championship. In the quarterfinals, we beat our conference member, Fresno Pacific. And in the championship game, we beat our conference member, Concordia. And later a couple weeks later, the Final Four of women's volleyball was all 4 GSAC schools. It wasn't involved with Azusa Pacific, but it was all 4 GSAC. The next year, all 4 schools were GSAC schools again in the volleyball. In the course of that time, the Elite 8, if I can use that term, I know it's a coined term for the NCAA, but the Elite 8 of the NAIA men's basketball tournament, 5 of the final 8 were GSAC schools. And so in my mind, I was beginning to think, we need to raise the bar. Our great competitions coming on the national level is coming from within our conference. And so I walked into Bill's office one day and said, Bill, I want to share something with you, an idea about going Division II. Before I could share it, he said, hang on here, because I've been thinking about something. What do you think about us going Division II? How about through my hand? That's what I was in here for. So that was probably in, I want to say 2009, somewhere right in that area. And we began to have dialogues. And then Bill had some phone calls with Mike Racy, who was at the NCAA at that time. And just doors began to open up. So we began the process while Bill was the athletic director. Excuse me. Unfortunately, right before we were about to submit our application, he had a pretty significant heart attack in April. It was about this time of 2010. And it delayed our submitting of the application. And it also gave Bill a pause for thought to say, okay, it's time for me to step away. So we completed the application. I became the athletic director July 1 of 2011. 10 days later, I got the word from the NC2A that they had accepted our application to become a Division II school. So I led the university through the process at that point in time. From the time I took over as AD, that was probably my primary job for the first 3 years, is to navigate us through the transition process. But yeah, with that, we did that 15 years ago.
And that really, from what I've heard, is a big task. I mean, to have that land in your lap from an idea to now you get to run with it. What was that transition like?
I will tell you, Jim, it wasn't always smooth. I remember sitting next to our president one time, and I was really questioning whether I was the right guy to be an athletic director. And I turned to our president, and we were at some lunch, and I said, John, have you ever felt like, God, why did you make me a president? Because I'm feeling that way. Like, why did you make me an athletic director? He said, oh, yeah, Gary. He goes, almost every day I wonder, why in the world did God open up doors for me to become a president? And I know I felt that way oftentimes particularly my first 2 years as the athletic director. I'm not equipped. I'm not capable. I'm not right. But part of that was my own insecurities in terms of constantly comparing myself to 3 NAIA Hall of Fame icons in Hamlow, Franson, and Odell, and saying, how would they handle it? And not allowing myself to be me and saying, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm wired. This is how God created me. It may not be the same way a Hamlow or a Franson or Odell would do it. But I think I did a lot of unnecessary self-comparison to other people in those early years. But we got through it, and we transitioned. And while I certainly enjoyed the NAIA years, they were absolutely wonderful years. I think we made the right decision to go in Division II, and that's been very fulfilling for us for the last 15 years as well.
Well, I know there's a ton of work in terms of, strategic plans and policy and procedure manuals and gender equity plans.
Yeah.
But I think, too, one of the things that must have been challenging for Azusa would be you were so nationally competitive, and then you entered into this transition, which does not allow national competition. Am I right about that?
Yeah, we had to go 2 years of no NAIA or NCAA competition. Now, we did take membership within the National Christian College Athletic Association, and Dan Wood, the president of the NCCA, was super. And we were fortunate to be in there. The thing is, regionally, when we transitioned from the NAIA to D2, we also did so in partnership with Cal Baptist, Point Loma, Fresno Pacific. And they all went into the NCCAA at the same time we did. So we had regional competition that we had to get through in order to get to nationals, which was, in one sense, a saving grace on our budget to a certain degree. But we did have that competition in our women's soccer, won the NCCA national championship. Our women's basketball played. I think they played Union for the national title, did not win it. But we had good postseason experiences in that sense. But yes, you're right. It wasn't NAIA or wasn't NCAA, 2 of which were of more notoriety than probably the National Christian College was at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Lots of small private schools that got into that transition were also able to utilize the NCCAA as at least an opportunity to still tell recruits that we can compete for a national championship. Yeah. And what you described of the NAIA championships was, heck, we were often playing our conference foes anyway.
Yep.
It sounds like you took several of those people with you when you went.
Well, and if I'm honest, the original conversation was, could we move the entire GSAC into NCAA Division II? That's how the conversation started. And there were some members who were hesitant to do that. And so that idea began to break up. But I do remember when we announced we were going Division II, I think we created some extra meetings in the Sooner Athletic Conference at that time where they said, hey, if the GSAC's doing this, maybe we need to look at it. And I know we had some impact on Southern Nazarene and Oklahoma Christian, Oklahoma Baptist, Rogers State, looking at going Division II. But we went as 4 out here in the GSAC, and then Concordia came shortly thereafter. Biola came, and most recently Westmont they're in their first year of active membership in Division II. So a lot of those old GSAC schools are now part of the Division II out here in California.
Yeah, it's interesting. Part of what led some SAC schools, and we're getting off topic just a little bit, but part of what led them to look at it was, you may remember there was a brief time, there's like a 1-year period where the NAIA Council of Presidents was sort of entertaining this idea of merging in some way with the NCAA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the unintended consequence of that was that schools thought, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to wait around for NAIA presidents to tell me what I ought to do. We're going to look at it ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, fast forward 15 years, and very recently, Azusa Pacific has announced that they will be transitioning away from NCAA Division II and joining Division III in the SCIAC conference.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about what went into that decision?
Yeah, boy, that's been a pretty fascinating process and thought line as we went through this. We have a new president. When I say new, he's now in his third year, but when he came on, Dr. Adam Morris just did an overall view of the university. And we had unfortunately in 2018, a financial and mission crisis all hit us within about a 3-week span. And one of those crises is big enough of its own. But when you hit a mission and financial crisis together, that's pretty significant. And shortly thereafter, then 2 years later, we get in the throes of COVID. And COVID impacted all of us in higher ed pretty significantly in athletic programs. Our president, Dr. Morris, started in 2022, and he spent the first year just touring constituents of APU, parents, alumni, donors, friends of the university, saying, tell me about the university and what you know about it and what's good and what needs to be fixed. In his tour, one of those questions that constantly came up was the dropping of football. In the midst of COVID, I was approached by our CFO at that time to say, Gary, I need $1.7 million. And I weighed a couple of options. Do I just take a certain percentage off of all sports, or do I make one sport kind of a sacrifice? And I went to the president's cabinet and presented, football as being kind of the sacrifice of it all, partly because of the costs of doing football as a Division II school. We were spending at least $43,000 on average for every road trip. And every one of our road trips was a flight. We didn't bust to any of our road games in 2019. And I didn't see our travel costs declining at all in the future. So university made the decision, a very difficult decision, but hard decision in the midst of COVID, to eliminate football. It happened quickly, really fast, within weeks. Excuse me. And it left a poor taste in a lot of people's mouth, including mine. I didn't like how we did that, but it's what we had to do. And when Dr. Morris did his tour, he heard that from a lot of people. So he asked me the question a year into his leadership here, what would have to be true for football to be at Azusa Pacific? He said, Gary, let's see how we can answer that question. He first came to me and said, he goes, I'd be interested in looking at bringing football back. But he said, Gary, I don't want to do that unless you really want to, because I took some pretty significant bullets when we made that decision. And I told him, I said, I love football. I've always loved Cougar football. And I said, I would love to have it back here. And once I gave him that green light, he said, okay, let's figure out what has to be true to have football back here. So we begin to look at a variety of things. We begin to look at consultants to bring in. Shortly thereafter, we were looking at our budget. And the president made a passing comment. He goes, Gary, we just got to find a more efficient way to run athletics. So football and efficiency were really two separate issues. They weren't together. But as we began to examine and look at things, we saw a thread that answered both of those, that kind of tied them together. And that thread was Division III, where there were 7 Division III schools here in the LA area, all within the 70-mile radius of Azusa Pacific, that had football. We could get 7 D3 games like this by using buses and not having to get on airplanes. We also saw we could significantly curtail our travel costs. And when we were inefficient in our athletic operations, it was all around our travel and meals line, our budget line. And we were spending nearly $1 million in travel every year. For a private school of our size, that's a significant investment. And so those two kind of tied together and came as an answer within Division III. Then the president also said, what are we going to look like as a university in 2030? And he asked me to say, what's Cougar Athletics going to look like in 2030? And I said, can I take that to 2032 when the CBS Warner contract is up for the NC2A, the whole March Madness contract, and the $900 million that comes through that contract for the NC2A that runs everything? I guess I'm just not totally confident that when that contract's up, its current structures as it is for Division II and Division III, will remain the same. And I just thought, okay, efficiencies of operations, football, future of college athletics. I just thought we would be better aligned and probably better insulated from some of the troubles coming down the pike as a Division III school. And we had a consultant, Bowlesby Sports Advisors, who were outstanding for us. And they gave us 4 recommendations, but one of those recommendations was going Division III. And it just lined up so well that we thought, this is what we got to do for the long-term future of Azusa Pacific. We're not in any financial straits, but we want to be good stewards of the resources we have. We just thought Division III accomplished all 3 of those goals that we had: efficiencies of operations, having football, and better protected from whatever it is that's coming down the pike in terms of college athletics and the operations of it.
Well, the geographic makeup of the conference makes a ton of sense. And I say that a year removed from Stanford joining the same conference as Miami and UCLA joining the same conference as Rutgers, which makes no sense.
And they're saying that. I will not forget, I think it was Mick Cronin, the UCLA coach, says, I've already seen the Statue of Liberty 3 times this year. And a lot of us in our conference haven't seen it at all. And that's not healthy in the long run.
Gary, what is the timeline? So when you went NAIA to D2, that was like 5 years. Is this a 1 or 2 year process?
This will be, it depends on how you want to classify things. I'm going to call it a 3-year process.
Okay.
Next year, we'll still be Division II next year. We'll still be in the Pacific West Conference, competing with the other 13 schools in this conference for the Pac West title and opportunities to compete in the NCAA regionals in all of our sports and perhaps even pursue national championships. Then in the fall of 26, we will begin the reclassifying process, and that will be 2 years, 26, 27, 27, 28. And we're hopeful, we're hoping to request a waiver that we will have satisfied all the Division III requirements, and that in the fall of 28, we can begin active membership. That's if you apply for the waiver. If you don't apply for the waiver, then it would be the fall of 29. In fact, I was just looking at St. Francis, which just announced last week, they're moving from Division I to Division III. They're going to take the 3-year reclassifying process. They'll be just like us. They're going to stay NCAA Division I next year. We're Division II next year in our conferences. But they're going to be like us in 26, begin the reclassifying process. They've already said they're going to do the 3-year process. We're looking at either 2 or 3 years, or we want to see how quickly we can make the adjustment. I understand for St. Francis to go from 1 to 3 is a significant jump, and maybe 3 years is very natural for them. For us, we'd like to think we could do this in 2 and be active members in 28. If not, active members competing for D3 championships in the fall of 29.
Yeah, well, and at least in your case, you've experienced this before. It's intriguing to me because you've already answered the question of how important was football to this. And the answer is it was very important that you wanted to get back to those roots of football, which in Division II on the West Coast is, virtually nobody plays it. Nobody can even afford to play football anymore.
There's 2 schools now west of Colorado. It's Western Oregon and Central Washington.
Okay.
And one of the reasons, I think whenever you make a decision at this level, and when you're changing associations or changing divisions, it isn't just one prong that drives it. There's multiple prongs. And when we left the NAIA, which we love, to go Division II, one of the prongs was finding a more permanent home for football. I mean, there is one year, I think it was, I forget which year it was. I want to say it's 2007, where I'm pretty sure nobody traveled more in football than we did. We played in Florida, Missouri, Wisconsin, Ohio, Texas, Montana. We were playing everywhere to get games in, and we couldn't keep doing that. And when we went Division II, there was Western Washington, Central Washington, Simon Fraser, Humboldt State, Dixie State, which is now Utah Tech. There were 5-6 schools out here in the West that we could play and stay in the West. But in the course of time, before we could even get Division II, Western Washington dropped football. Then Humboldt State dropped football. Dixie State moved to Division I. And then Simon Fraser dropped football. So if we were to go back now as a Division II football program, we play a school in Oregon, a school in Washington, and everyone else we would play would probably be in Texas and Colorado. And that doesn't help us with the efficiencies of operations of what we're trying to do in terms of an athletics program here.
Well, it makes a ton of sense. So now the next question for me is, what has the reaction to this decision been?
Yeah.
Let's start internally, but maybe you can add some insight on external reaction as well.
Two opposite reactions. Externally, lots of excitement, lots of enthusiasm. Football's coming back. People are excited about that. Some out there, an external question, Division III, why Division III? But internally, I wouldn't say high resistance, but just probably a certain level of disappointment amongst our coaches. They're losing their scholarships, and that's a toy they're very used to using to secure athletes that they would like to in order to build their teams. And we don't have any coaches with any Division III experience. I take that back. We have one coach who did coach a little bit at Division III 15 years ago, but we really don't have much experience with Division III. And I think there's some apprehension. How do we do this? I'm not sure how we do this, is what some of our coaches are thinking, and trying to figure out how do we recruit and what kind of athletes do we get. And it was a lot easier to have scholarships. Now, having said that, I've talked to a lot of my colleagues out there, and I've tried to talk to colleagues who have been at every level, Division I, Division II, Division III. And a couple of them that I've talked to have said, I will never go back to Division II or Division I, that they have absolutely enjoyed Division III. And one of them said, Gary, you'll never know how wonderful life is without scholarships until you lose them. And she goes, I don't want to go back to Division I or Division II. This has been a wonderful life of competition and a balance in our life that's been really good for us at our school. And this is a very highly competitive Division III school. And so we're trying to bring our coaches along, and they're doing well. They're doing better. They've known now for about 7 weeks. We told our coaches into January, this is probably something we're going to be doing. And they have been doing a pretty good job of getting on board, but it has taken them some time to process it emotionally and figure out what this looks like. Just yesterday, we had a panel of SCIAC coaches on campus, and we did a Q&A with them for 90 minutes. And I think it was extremely beneficial to our coaches to see people at the Division III level thriving and doing their jobs, coaching well, and enjoying it with smiles. And so we're going to keep doing these dialogues going forward. But yeah, two different responses, but we'll get there on the internal side.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I often wonder, and I don't know that you know the answer, but your fans, they may not care whether you're playing Pomona Pitzer or Cal State LA,
Yep.
or Hope International or Westcliff. So that level between D2, D3, NAI may not be critical to them. It sounds like you've sort of invigorated quite a few of them just with bringing football back, and I sure get it from the coach's perspective. Some of it is ego. So when you go from NAI to D2, there's some, oh yeah, this is going to be great.
Yep.
we're taking a perceived step up. And often what you see with NAIA schools that go to Division II is you see coaches not lasting a particularly long time. Not in every case, but in some cases you just see where, it turns out that move was not such a great thing for your career. So, I get it. I understand that just the uncertainty of it would be challenging.
Jim, it's interesting. Couple of stories that come to mind as I looked at the transition. One of them comes from Tim Selgo, who's a dear friend of mine and the great former athletic director at Grand Valley State. But I remember many years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, he and I were touring Grand Valley State. And he said, Gary, outside of Michigan and Michigan State, we kind of own the western half of the state. He says, because people just care about winning. Do you win? He goes, they really don't care, to your point, whether you're NAI, D2, D3. They just know you as, you're a winner. You do well. And that impacted me quite a bit. Another one was many years ago, back in, I think it was 1997, and I was a little bit of a smart aleck kid at that time, I think, working. We beat, as an NAI school, we beat the University of Laverne in a doubleheader in baseball, beat them pretty good. And later that year, Laverne went on to win the Division III national championship. And I remember I made this remark around the lunch table, what kind of championship can that be? We hammered them. And our football coach at the time, a gentleman by the name of Jim Milhon, leaned over the table and he pointed his finger at me and he said, Gary, that championship means everything to those students, those coaches, those faculty, staff members, the alumni, everyone involved with that University of Laverne. That championship means everything. And I realized we've won. It's interesting, Jim, it's you and me. I think you and I are number 2 or 3 in terms of NAI championships. Our schools are. I think Simon Fraser's won the most. You're number 2 and we're number 3 in terms of NAI national championships. And we're proud of those. But to be honest with you, across the street, down the road, 5 miles from here, down in downtown LA, they don't care if it's an NAI, D2, D1, D3. They go, Azusa Pacific, that's a school that wins. And I've learned that over the years. And yes, you're right. It's one of the things I've also seen over the last 6 weeks is how important ego is to people about my son or daughter. They play Division II, or I'm not a D3 coach. I'm a D2 coach. And there's an ego part that plays a lot into our thinking and our decisions that I don't think is healthy. At the end of the day, the mission never changes. The mission at Azusa Pacific does not change whether we're D1, D2, D3. Although I will say this, if we were D1, I think the pressures of D1 would put a stress on our mission. But in terms of D2, D3, NAI, our mission doesn't change. It's the same thing about impacting young men and women for Christ through sport. And we're the ones who care about the championships. The general public, they just want to, do you win? Do you lose? And hey, you're a winner. I want to follow you. And so we want to be good at Division III. Yes, with a different type of student athlete. That's very true. But there are a lot of student athletes out there who need to be playing basketball and soccer and volleyball and track and field and football as a D3 athlete at Azusa Pacific, because they're going to have a great experience and hopefully we're going to impact them and they're going to take the lessons they learned at APU. It's going to transform their life for the rest of their life. Yeah. And that's always been our mission and will continue to be our mission, whether we're NAI, D2 or D3. And I got to wrestle a little bit with the egos out there, but we'll get there. We'll get there. And I think I've said this to many people. I think there's going to be people who are going to come. I probably won't see the end of this because I'm of an age where I might be retiring sometime in the foreseeable future. But I think someone's going to pull me off my retirement couch and shake my hand and say, Gary, going Division III was one of the best decisions Azusa Pacific ever made. We're going to thrive. I'm confident of it. I've been watching other D3 schools built and like Azusa Pacific and with a mission like Azusa Pacific, and they're doing exactly what we were 15, 20 years ago. And I want to get back to that. I want to be able to thrive as a university and have an athletic department that helps that. And I really believe as a Division III member, we're going to be able to do that by properly stewarding our resources and bringing in young men and women who want to be here at Azusa Pacific.
Yeah. I think if you follow the legends that preceded you as athletic directors, there will be some that pull you in and shake your hand and say, great job. And there will be others who point at you and say, what in the world were you thinking? And it's just the nature of it, the nature of the business.
It is. I did receive an email from an alum who said, "You're no Bill O'Dell or Gary, or you're no Bill O'Dell or Terry Franson," and I'll be first admit, no, I'm not. Far from it. They were great people, but I do think this is while it's a unique decision and a challenging decision, I think in the long run it's going to be a really good decision for us. And as I tell our coaches, the next 2 to 3 years are going to be choppy. The waters are going to be choppy, but there's some smooth sailing out there. If we can just endure these times and work together, find answers to the questions that we have, solutions to the problems that are out there. I said, I think we'll be grateful that we're in this position come 2030, 2032, wherever time that might be down the road.
Yeah. And so we just have time for maybe one more kind of quick question, and you alluded to this. You alluded to the CBS contract with the NCAA, but to some extent, there's so much uncertainty about the future in general. I mean, if someone asked me, put a gun to my head and said, what will the future be? I would say the future is going to be small colleges are just going to play each other without any, there may not even be an NCAA or an NAIA. It may just be common sense rules the day, and we just sort of regionally play. But what obviously you had to kind of gaze into the crystal ball a little bit as you were approaching this, and what was it about the future that maybe kind of helped support the decision that you ultimately made?
Yeah, a lot of factors into that, and Jim, I've been really blessed and fortunate to be a part of a number of NCAA committees and get to know a lot of people at the national office and throughout the country, a lot of colleagues throughout the country. And that's been a real treasure of this job for me is to know these people. And as we've had conversations, I know there are people really concerned about whether the NC2A will be a tenant in that beautiful championship building that it's in Indianapolis in 10 years. They have 600 lawsuits, more than 600 lawsuits pending against the NCAA right now. And they have said the courts are going to decide. And President Baker, Charlie Baker, who I think is just an outstanding leader and doing a yeoman's-like job in his leadership right now, even he has said, I can't control the rulings of judges. He goes, and that's where the NC2A is really taking a hit right now. I think if you would have told me 5 years ago that the Pac-12 would not exist, that in itself, being out here in California, has impacted me greatly, because that was a money grab. That was USC, UCLA saying we need better media rights, and boom, they're gone. And pretty soon, that's what you have: Stanford and Cal playing in the ACC, and the Conference of Champions is gone, and that happened like that. It makes me think. And it was all surrounded around money. And you hear what's happening, the impact of what this House settlement could have on college athletics. And you hear Michigan saying we need an extra $50 million, and other schools need millions of dollars. I just have a feeling that contract with CBS is going to be shaped differently. I don't have any inside knowledge. I don't know that. I know the bylaws call that D2 gets a certain percentage, D3 gets a certain percentage of that contract. I just know the courts, the money grab, the contracts. As a school of 2,100, we don't have much of a voice. We got to position ourselves that we have college athletics in the future in a way that makes sense for us. And I think of Mike Racy, who I think I mentioned earlier, but Mike is now the commissioner of the MIAA D2 conference and one of the top D2 conferences. And Mike is bringing together thought leaders to say, what is this going to look like if the Power Four do take the contracts and run? What does what do championships look like? And to your point, Jim, are they become regional? Do they become local? Out here in California, we have this thing that runs our high schools called the CIF, and they are federated, and their championships are federated by sections. Do we emulate something like that in the NAI D3, D2, maybe lower FCS schools in the future. And I think we've got to start having those conversations now because, and nothing against Washington State and Oregon State, but obviously they got left holding the bag, so to speak, as the Pac-12 blew up. And I think we need to have conversations and say, what could this look like in case? We got to have a plan B. And I think that's what's beginning to take place, are conversations around plan B and what that might look like for the future. Because I think everyone agrees athletics at colleges can and should be a good thing. It's getting, the scales are tipping, particularly at the Power Four, in a poor way that doesn't represent, I think, the original scheme and the original thought of what college athletics should be. But I think for the vast majority of us, we say it brings a lot of good to campus. Let's not lose it, but let's create it in such a way that's still efficient and people get to compete in their sport and the local communities are proud of what's being accomplished.
Yeah, well said. And, there's no question. You and I, we could talk about this for the next 8 hours. And frankly, I would welcome the opportunity because I just find everything that you've shared to be fascinating. Gary, thanks so much for joining us on Small College Conversations.
Jim, it's an honor. And I am deeply grateful for you asking me to be a part of this. I love the conversation. Yeah, we can continue this offline more and more in the days ahead.
Well, whether it's offline or online, I'm grateful for the work that you do and your willingness to share your experiences and insights. And to our audience who's listening, thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to having you again on our next Small College Conversation.